much. Let me first thank the association. I was not aware of such an association, and I was quite a little bit upset that how come I didn't know about it? And so I charged you, Gang, how long has this been? And I was pretty sure you would say, oh, it started 5 months ago, 6 months ago. I was quite surprised to hear that it has been there for 4 years, which got later corrected to 5 years. So my disappointment has been growing with me.
With 5 conferences.
5 conferences means you have been at least 5 years, right? That's the inference I'm drawing. And I've missed it. So I apologize, and hence I thank also Vivek who contacted me, thank you very much, and Yugang who told me that I must be here. So I'm here. But what I would like to point out is that I'm sorry I'm not speaking in Hindi, as you can clearly make out. But that's because I have to tell you a story why I can't do that. I studied in Calcutta and I did have Hindi in school. I was not that bad a student in Hindi. Then I come to Delhi and I start my work here. And this was in the early 90s. Our daughter had just started going to school, so she's been there for about a few months. And you know how kids are, they pick up anything very fast. So I went with her to a grocery store, and I thought that I had been able to communicate to the shopkeeper in the purest Hindi, that what I needed. And believe you me, the shopkeeper fully understood what I wanted, and indeed gave me what I needed. I was very happy. I was walking back. My daughter says, Baba, from now on, if you're taking me to the shop, I will do the talking. So I asked her why. She said, your accent is atrocious. Bengali speaking Hindi is not a good idea, I can assure you. So I'll desist from doing that. Now, by the way, I'm extremely excited by what I see, that there is an actual association. So hopefully you have an agenda, you have a research program. And by the way, Sumitji, I was completely bowled over. Because even academics don't say what you said.
Yes.
As to how research should go. So it was like music to my ears when I was listening to what you had to say. So anyway, so I do hope that the Law and Economics Association would be able to develop that. The only fear I have is that, again a story, that I came back to India and started working very early. So one of my juniors got inspired by me, and so before returning back to India, he asked me, should he? I said, absolutely. This is where all the action is. This is mid-80s. This is where all the action is. Now, what's the point being there? Come here. You can be the harbinger of change and participate in it. I said, but don't go. It's a long time ago. I said, don't go to Kolkata though. So he said, why? I said, there, you know, people are still in that old school, right? Leftists are worried about what Rosa Luxemburg said. And, you know, many of the things that was being talked about here, I felt that that's what they're doing. We're highly intellectual people. But, you know, I would like to know what is happening today in India, right? So maybe not there. Now, I looked around because I know I'll get lynched once I leave. There are enough Bengalis out there, right? So, so I told him, don't go there because... So he said, no, I'll come back. So he did go back to Kolkata. He didn't listen to me. And I met him 3 months later, and he said, you know, you're just unnecessarily critical of Kolkata. You may have had some bad experiences, I don't know. But I go to the faculty lounges, and now I'm not in the university. I go to the faculty lounge to have lunch, and every day I see groups of people. One table is discussing astrophysics, one table is discussing Bengali literature, another table is discussing chemistry, and you say they don't do research. Maybe things have changed. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I met him at a conference a year later, and he said, Shubhashis, are you right? I said, why, what happened? He said, it took me some time to figure out that the astrophysics table was actually a bunch of Bengali literature professors. So I do hope that in law and economics it doesn't become economists writing on law and lawyers writing on economics. Right? So that is my fear, and I've seen that happen in India all the time. For us, multidisciplinary or getting together essentially means somebody who's been trained in something, doing everything but that thing. Right? So that's not what I hope this becomes, right? So there should be a real addressing a problem, right, by lawyers and economists. The same problem, right? Different perspectives. And as Vivek explained, our perspectives are a little bit different. So that's the idea I hope that we will be able to implement, or you will be able to implement in this. Now, there were some discussions on the economic consequences of new laws. Surprisingly, we had done an impact assessment of the, I'm very forgetful, Negotiable Instruments Act. Professor Madhav Menon asked me to do it, right? And actually by law, every statute should have that. And if you read, so at the end of every one of these laws, I couldn't believe it when Professor Menon told me. So I went and started looking. And indeed there is a last paragraph which says what are the consequences of this and what resources are needed, etc., etc. And that is really a cut and paste of what was written in the earlier law. As general as it could be. It means, we are very good at destroying the intent and purpose of anything. So that was what was happening in our laws. And I do believe that it is important to understand the economic costs of any intervention that we are trying to do. Because law is an intervention. It doesn't allow individuals to operate the way they want, right? So there is either some restriction, could be enabling, could be mandatory, one doesn't know, right? But essentially, it's an intervention, and hence there will be some costs. And there will be some costs of enforcement. Right? So those, I do think that, that's something where both lawyers and economists can immediately start the work. These problems are well defined. We can take, law by law, which we think are important, in commercial activities at least, because it's easier to do these calculations, sit down and just do it. Now, it is with this thought, and it was again Professor Menon who forced me to write this. He had taken me to Bhopal, when what is it called, the judicial, So do that, and I spent 3 days with the Supreme Court judges at that time. Essentially, a discussion on law and economics where I gave some lectures on economics. Law and economics. And Professor Menon told me that I must write the book. Raj must do this lecture. And I didn't know much about the law at that time. So I said that I will do it, but for that I need to get Indian case laws. Right? And that is what Vivek was talking about, because that is when the two of us got together and said the best way to do that is to teach a course. And that's how we started teaching at JNU. But the book did come out, right? So the book is in 2 volumes. The first part is theory, and the second part are laws as applicable or applied laws in India, right? So that's how we did. That's how I did bring up the book with professor from Azim Premji University. Now, another thing that came up, and it's important to understand this, is our law is in, Tanka is gone, but law is in English, right? It's a very, just think about it, almost everything that we do, especially everything official, is in 3 languages. English, Hindi and local. But law is always in English, which is very good for us researchers because we can hunt for cases on the web, right? Yeah, now it is too. But the question to ask is why was it in English? And I realized that when I was part of a group between Sweden and the Netherlands, which were working on harmonization of laws in Europe after EU. And then I realized what the issue was. Because they are trying to harmonize their laws, and in the language that it will be written, and I was looking at, of course, the commercial laws, the meaning of income in the dictionary is very different from the legal meaning of income as developed by case law, right? And this is different from for every country. So trying to, make them uniform with one language, keeping the relevant case laws in mind, is just impossible. Right? Whereas if you say it's in English, we didn't go through that problem. In fact, I keep telling my colleagues in these two universities with whom I still work, or where I still work, is that you should have learned how to form a union from the Union of India. We were much more diverse than you can even imagine. Much more, ethnically nationalistic than you can even imagine. And yet, we started off with one country, being one country, and today we are one country. So you should learn how to form a union from us, not from the United States. Because whichever conference you go to, that was the discussion, US and EU. Now, the last thing I want to say is, why are, Professor Schäfer gave a lot of examples, which really we should understand if we want to do law and economics, as to how this happens, and we're going through similar transformative processes now. The entire global architecture of doing business, commerce is going to change thanks to technology. So, whatever he was referring to and how the societies responded to those new things, we have an opportunity today to do the same thing. Right? And since there are many young people here, it will completely depend on what you do, not on what we do. We could care less. We are on our way out. Right? But I do hope that you seize this opportunity to design the society the way you want it, because it will change and it will go through fundamental changes. Right? So I just want to make one point in this regard on some things that we are discussing. We tend to discuss everything impulsively. So today, when we talk of labor markets, we talk of hiring and firing. The moment we say hiring and firing, you immediately have the room divided into two. Those who say it should be, those who say it should not be, with nothing in the middle. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. The first public versus private discussion started in the 70s. Today it's still going on in India. You know what is the funny thing? That if you pick up paragraphs from today's discussion, you can match it almost 100% with the discussion in the 70s. In other words, we just take up positions, and that's it. We don't evolve by discussion, which is what the type of association that we're trying to build up. It should respond to changing circumstances, to context and all of that. And that can only happen if everybody involved, all the perspectives that are involved, right, get a hearing from everybody else. So that's the idea of bringing highly trained experts in each discipline together. In other words, instead of having multidisciplinary persons, we should be having multidisciplinary teams, because then it works. Otherwise, as I said, if I write on law, nobody should read it. And because I'm not trained in law. I can appreciate what the lawyers are saying. I can respond to what the lawyers are saying. But to take the initiative and actually do law requires a lot more training than I have. Right? So that's the reason why I say, I'll give one example and stop there. If we talk about the labor market today, one of the important things that we have to be able to develop in India is human capital. We have the best institutions, right? We also have great, highly skilled, highly trained, highly educated, very intellectual people here, trained here, I should say. And then either one of two things happen. They go abroad, or they become government officials, or they become academics, least interested in what is happening here, more interested in what is happening there, because then you have intermittent trips abroad, right? So we are never connected to this country. And we are losing it. And I say that is because the labor market doesn't offer the human capitalist any return. And the hiring and firing is a very, very static approach to look at it. I don't care who is right and who is wrong. But if that's our discussion point in the labor market, we are making a huge mistake. Human capital, you can throw money, you can get the best trainers, the state-of-the-art educational infrastructure, you will not develop human capital. Unless the human capitalist invests his or her own time and effort. That's a private cost which nobody can share. And hence that's a private cost that must get a return in the future. And if that return is uncertain, if the only way I can increase my salary is by jumping across jobs, then there is no specific investment being made in any activity, there is no human capital growing. Please remember, human capital is not simply knowledge. Human capital is the ability to improve productivity. And that is an on-the-job training. The education and the intellect is a necessary condition, or are necessary condition, but they are not sufficient. And we are doing nothing about the labor market in that fashion. The turnover rate, somebody talked about the IT industry in India and how great it is. It's manual labor that we do in IT. Now some things are happening. Things are changing, right? But it's not coming from those who are IT practitioners. In the health sector, for example, India has made many, many great innovations, cheap, affordable by everybody, right? So those are happening. And in the IT, I was interviewing a big IT company, big guy, everybody knows his name, and I asked him that I've heard that there is a lot of turnover in your company. Isn't that a loss? And his response was, no, younger people have greater learnability. So that is better for us. That is no way to build up human capital, right? And hence, if we try to enhance labor, and if we look at labor markets all over the world, Germany has the highest productivity. If we look at the labor market laws there, it's very different from what we have, and very different from what we are focusing on. So that is where lawyers and economists need to come together. These are institutions, really. The labor market is an institution. It's not a free-for-all. It's not market fundamentalism. It requires rules and regulations. And that's what we should be discussing. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I may have